There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so when I finally get to do this, and at P&G, when you have your vice president come out, it's like a once a year thing. So my vice president comes out, and I'm going to present my program, so it goes according out to the whole corporation. So I got really excited because none of my peers had ever gotten to present like this. I made sure I was like super passionate, and then I presented, and the VP was like, "Oh my God, I love your enthusiasm. I have no idea what you're talking about." And this is in front of all my peers, and it was like horrifying. And then my plant manager jumps up, she explains the program, he gives the approval, and it goes across Procter & Gamble in the US, Procter & Gamble Asia. Hundreds and hundreds of people go through my program, and it's the basis of P&G's first online course. And so what I tell people is I learned something super valuable that day, which is it doesn't matter how smart you are or how brilliant your idea is if no one understands what you're talking about. So I thought just because I was smart and enthusiastic, he would get what I was talking about, and he had no idea. Now I'm even more obsessed about clarity and conciseness, because you can read the statistics. It's probably 8 seconds is probably too long now. I mean, people have 8-second attention spans, which means they fully pay attention for only 8 seconds. And then they decide if they're going to really stay engaged or they start to tune out. And it means you have a better chance of engaging with a goldfish with a 9-second attention span than the person you're really talking to. So they could be looking at you, but are they really registering what you're saying? So one of the skills that I decided I wanted to help people with is how to get to yes faster. So at P&G, I was P&G's first Asian American woman in the supply chain to be in their call it top 1%. And I was the only one for like 12 years. And I had to do a lot of career navigation to get people to say yes and stop discounting what I had to say. And I took that to try to teach other people how to get to yes faster. So I'm going to show you 4 ways to be more persuasive, a technique to anticipate what your audience's concerns are. That's more accurate than what you might be doing today. And then I'm going to show you the 5 typical types of objections that people make and how to deal with them. And I don't mean like the price is too high. It's the types of things that get you pushed out of the game before you even enter in a negotiation. So I'd like to know just really quickly if any of these are true, because I want to get calibrated with you, but have you had frustration because you get too many no's? Do you get approvals, but it takes too long to get to yes? Do you feel like sometimes you explain and you explain and you explain and you wonder like, why don't people get what I'm saying? Or do you feel like you're getting great ideas rejected, not because of like the idea itself, but because you couldn't convince the listener? So looking for your background in getting to yes.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. There's been multiple times where I've had a great idea, but it's different than the norm or the process or the status quo, and because of that, it's like, well, you try that first, and then if it works, then well, but you could be the guinea pig for that.
So. What about you, Ivana?
Yeah, I could see some of these things resonating with me. I mean, I'm in sales, obviously, so getting no or getting rejected is something that does happen quite often. And I think the point, like you explain and you're wondering why they don't get it, that's a skill that I could probably get better at, to making sure that what I'm having to say lands with my audience. So I definitely resonate with some of these points.
And this is beyond like what I say, like in sales, meaning everybody has to sell something. Like I was never in sales before until I became an entrepreneur. I had to sell my own programs, but I always had to say like, I needed to get approval and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously objections are super tough. And I always wished that, it'd be easy, that people just agreed with me. Like nobody was skeptical. No one was risk averse. No one needed me to go back and forth with all this proof about why it was going to work. But in reality, So on an internal basis or selling externally, you have to ask for money. You have to pitch an idea that someone might consider moonshot. So they have no idea really what you're talking about. You might have to bust conventional wisdom, or you might have to propose something that's controversial, which means you're going to hear no. So I'm not exactly sure what your process is, because some people wing it, but I had a very simple process. I would over prepare for everything. I would articulate, I would like anticipate everything that someone might have as an objection. And if someone asked me a question, I left it to, I would go into like great and excruciating detail and explain things, because I wanted, in a corporate setting, I wanted to demonstrate how prepared I was and how smart I was. So in the context of trying to get promoted, it was really important to show people, you know, I had the ability to advance up in the corporation. So are any of you wing it people, or any of you over prepare people?
I'm a wing it guy. I wing it.
Same.
Yeah, I wish I wasn't over prepared, but I'm definitely a wing it person right now.
Okay. So, and if you're now it might work in sales, but I will guarantee you that it doesn't work in a corporate setting.
I don't think it necessarily works in sales either.
Okay.
I think like you want enough to be dangerous, but you don't want to over prepare where like you spent 3 hours prepping for a meeting that they ended up showing up 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late for anyways. So they only gave you like, 25 minutes, even though, it was scheduled for 45 or something like that. So I think somewhere in between would be good.
Yeah. Well, in my case, it didn't matter. Honestly, there was very low correlation between how much I prepared and how much they got what I was talking about. So I would over prepare, and I could be over prepared and not get it. I could be under prepared and win approval. So preparation in my case wasn't like I ended up over preparing and over talking. Okay, then I became an entrepreneur, and I learned this super valuable lesson when a client disagreed with me. Okay, so I told him, he was already my client, and I said, okay, let's talk about workshops I can give, and I can help you master clear, concise communications. And this guy says to me, oh, I don't need help being clear. I'm just smarter than my audience. And I was like, what? I actually never, he kind of said like my audience was stupid. And I never had anybody ever say that to me, ever, just this one guy. And I thought really quickly on my feet, and I said, how about this? What if I can show you how to help any of your audiences understand your complicated concepts? And he said, oh yeah, that's exactly what I need. So we give the workshop, and I'm feeling really good about myself. And then afterwards, I'm like, wait a minute. It was the same workshop, whether I pitched it as teaching him to master clear, concise communications, or if I was explaining how to teach him how to, complicated concepts. Like the only thing different was how I positioned the workshop. So what I started realizing was I was talking too much about what was important to me or what I thought should be important to them, instead of really understanding what was actually relevant to them. So like there's all these things that you know and that you can say when you're talking to people. There's all these things that your audience knows and believes. What's relevant to your audience is what they can understand. But the moment you start talking about something that's irrelevant to them, normally provokes an objection. So I can help you master clear, concise communications. And the guy's like, oh, I don't need help. It's not me. It's my audience. The moment I said, but I can help your audience understand your complicated concepts, he was like, yeah, sign me up. Let's do that. So it's all about not preparing for every possible or thinking about every possible objection, but there's a way to really focus what the other person is thinking about. So I call it, there's a persuasion zone where both of information that's relevant to both you and your listener, and it's where your listener is the most receptive to new ideas, and it's your zone of highest influence. And so what I'm going to work with you today is how to anticipate the persuasion zone better, so you can anticipate objections better and preempt concerns smarter, and then present more persuasively. So The first thing is when I talk to people, I always say, make sure your message is targeted based on your audience's point of view. Right? So you want to start off by understanding how aligned you are, your position is with your audience's position. Do you get sales training where they talk about this?
Yeah, so at LinkedIn, we had something, Ivana and I had something called the value engagement methodologies.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right, we'll learn about what they care about for their specific industry. So, you know, if it's like pharmaceuticals, biotech, compliance, or getting approved by the FDA, you know, COVID obviously is like a huge, so the training that they had us was just like, all right, so who cares about LinkedIn and all that? Like what do they care about? And then first doing the research about like the industry trends, and then you can align it instead of just like, you know, like just praying that, you know, this is going to resonate with them.
Right. The other thing is you have to make sure you know how much they believe they need your solution. Does that make sense? So it's not just knowing about the trends, but it's how much they believe they need what you have. So someone who needs a lot of convincing is unaware that they have a problem, and they don't have a lot of belief they need a solution. So it's like, so they're just unaware of what's going on, which is different than someone who's calling you up and saying, I'm seeking clarity about what you offer. How does it work? So the amount of convincing, so this is like the classic sales funnel, right? Like if I don't have a problem and I'm unaware of my problem, like, then you have to convince me I even have a problem before I even am ready to buy anything, right? So you need a different message and you have different objections. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Let's try this. I just want you to imagine that you are in a natural beauty company and you're looking at an analytical software called Pop Analytics, all right? So you are in this natural beauty company, you make, I don't know, like skincare. And this Pop Analytics is gonna help you identify retail sales trends and create more compelling selling stories because buyers need more specific data. Okay, so let me give you some background. So your company is now selling nationally to retailers like Target and Walmart, and you want to double your growth rate. And your product is super popular with influencers and it's getting a lot of buzz. The national buyer demands different data in order to promote or highlight your product. So previously, regional managers operated off of goodwill. Like you could walk into your local Whole Foods and say, I have this brand new product, we put it on your shelf, and they would say yes. Now that you're national, the national buyer demands something much more compelling. And now your results are measured against something called category management. So your sales are judged against your competitor sales and the beauty category sales. And for the first time, instead of just knowing how your business is going, you have to know about the industry, the category, your competitors, and other products. And then last, your sales are judged by what's called the red line. So your products, so if your products fall below a certain line, they're at risk of being delisted. And you've never heard of the red line before. So you've only been concerned about sales going up. You didn't know there was a threshold about sales going down. Okay, got it? All right, so who is the least aware and most aware for the need for data analytics? So I have the VP of sales who is saying sales trends are slowing. And how can we increase sales? We did better when we were regional. Now that we're national, we're struggling. You have the analyst who's saying we don't need more data. You have the VP of sales saying, I like the Pop Analytics demo. We need better selling stories. And you have the GM saying, people love our brands. The product is great. We're getting great reviews. We have plenty of data. We just need more sales. So who is the least aware for the need for Pop Analytics?
Like, I feel like it'd probably affect them one of the most because that's it would really help them in, it's like a personal pain, like it helped them with their job, but based on the comment there, it said we don't need more data, I can analyze everything.
Right. So the least aware person, so the person you'd have to convince the most to get pop analytics is like the person who says, we don't need more data. I analyze everything.
Yeah.
Who's the next? Who's more aware, but like the second least aware? The GM, the VP of finance, or the VP of sales?
GM?
The GM. So the GM obviously knows their data must be important because we have an analyst and they have data, but she is more worried about sales should be better. Next, it's the VP of finance, because the VP of finance is saying there's a problem and there's something different between the fact that regional and national are selling differently. And then obviously the person who's most aware of the need for data analytics is the person who's saying, like, I like pop analytics. Not only are they saying data analytics, they're saying a specific solution. So what's happening is you have to think about where every person lies. It's more than just knowing what's going on in the industry, but you have to understand their point of view because they're going to have different objections. So the GM is what I call problem recognition. So she understands that there's a or like data is needed, but she thinks there's a problem, but she thinks it's a different problem, which is sales needs to be better. So think about how much convincing you need to do with her to get her interested in pop analytics. First, you have to convince her that data analytics and sales are tied. Whereas the VP of finance is searching for a solution. He may or may not be seeking data analytics, but he knows there's a problem and he's looking to solve it, which is different than the VP of sales who's saying, I know your solution is the best. So when you think about your presentation, you really need to target your key stakeholders' specific point of view. So I don't know, when you walk into your sales presentations, do you think about where they're at in the desire cycle also?
For more context for you, Rebecca, I'm a sales development representative, so I don't close deals. I just agree, let key decision makers or mobilizers take a meeting with an account executive like Davidson. So I'm curious from I don't know if this is too granular for my role, but I'm very intrigued because you're right. It's, there's people that are so unaware, and then there's people that are give me on that next meeting. So for the people that are more unaware, like the analyst, I'm trying to think through how would I convince them? I guess that's the point of objection handling, but.
That's what I'm going to go through next.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but the first thing is, so and it's really important. So if you have no sales background, you don't even know if this even exists. You have some training in sales background, but no one tells you, do they really care and how much convincing do you need to do? When I actually work with entrepreneurs, I tell them, I'm going to show you how to find the people who are most likely to say yes. So we're going to sell to people who are more likely to say yes than everybody. So we go and I show them how to do that using the same process.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So, I mean, you have to think about what is your approach to overcoming objections and where do you need to make some improvement. But I think most people don't even think about how aligned are your objections when you walk through the room. So again, it's one thing, it's in terms of sales, but I want you to think about it now. If you're trying to climb the corporate ladder, if you don't understand what your boss's boss's boss is looking for, when you go in to pitch something, a program, and you're not aligned and they think everything is fine and puppies and rainbows, you're going to have a very difficult time convincing them, and you're going to need another strategy to get yourself noticed. So the same things that you apply from a sales standpoint actually work from a career navigation standpoint.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to try to find someone's sweet spot or hook what's important to them. So I tell people it's based on what I call their attitude. So you remember my client, here I told him, here's what I do and how I'm unique, because this is what I wanted him to know. And then he was like, my audience isn't very smart. So he was uninterested. And then when I told him what my workshop could do for him, or more specifically for his audience, I can help your audience understand your complicated concepts. He was like, that's exactly what we need. In other words, he was looking for this holy grail solution, and I had it. So he was both uninterested and totally interested at the same time, depending on how I spoke to him. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So in other words, knowing their attitude is often the difference between preempting or provoking an objection. So here's what I mean by attitude. On the vertical axis, it's how aware are they of your solution. And on the horizontal axis is how much they desire the solution that you have. So a person who has high solution awareness and high desire for what you have, they're looking for the holy grail. They're looking for the perfect thing. And when you offer to them, they're like, oh my God, that's exactly what I was looking for. A person who has high awareness but a low desire is skeptical. So they intellectually know that your solution might work or be important, but they're thinking, maybe I can get by without it, or does this really matter? Or, I can make it discretionary. So think about training. A lot of people say training is important. They know it's important, but they, when push comes to shove or the budget gets cut, training goes out the window. So they have high solution awareness, but a low desire. So it's more intellectual than it is gut level. A person who has a high desire for your help, but a low awareness of the solution has an attitude that is cautious. So they really want help, but they're not exactly sure what the best solution is for them. So they might be like, I need help. I don't know what's out there, or I need help, but that might not work for me or my industry. That's for a big company. I'm a little company, and they just have some doubts, which is different than a person who has low solution awareness and a low desire, and they're uninterested. And as far as they're concerned, like I said, it's puppies and rainbows, or when you talk to them, you walk away and you just think, they don't know what they don't know. So clearly one is much easier to sell to. However, sometimes the way you position things, you can provoke an objection, even though you could have actually gotten them to say yes. Okay, so let's talk about Pop Analytics, for example. So the VP of sales is already saying, we need better tools to sell to the national retail buyer. So what types of things could you say to the VP of sales? So the VP is already saying, we need better tools to sell to national retail buyers.
What's your budget?
Go ahead.
I said, what's your budget?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, here's what we do. We give you these category, retail, competitor insights. We give you tell them, you explain the deal. Like, what can you do for me? Here's the deal. Now, the GM is saying, we're one of the fastest growing natural brands and we need to grow faster. So if they're skeptical, what types of things could you say to them to increase their desire? So in this case, what you're thinking about is you have to link to what motivates them. So you have to link to getting into more doors, staying on the shelves longer, growing profitably faster. So Pop Analytics helps fast growing brands do these things. So you're not necessarily talking about the specifics, but you're saying, I can get you what you're looking for in the bigger picture. If you're talking to the VP of finance, who is saying, category management is slowing our sales, there's something wrong between regional and national, what could you say to the VP of finance? So what you could do in this case is then talk about, right, Pop Analytics helps fast growing companies affordably scale and grow faster with category management tools. And then in the case of that data analytics guy who is saying, I can do everything. And this is a real story with my client. is that is saying, hey, look, we can give you fast customized retailer insights. And one of our clients was able to pitch, like get 14 orders. They pitched to 14 different clients in one day, and each one of those clients gave them an order because they were able to use our retail analytics. So what they were doing is they were provoking an emotion that someone could not do on their own. So, but do you see how each one of these is a different angle to how you approach them based on their solution awareness and their desire? Okay, so when someone is seeking the Holy Grail, you explain the deal, and all you're thinking to yourself is, what more do they need to know to say yes? Yeah, what's your budget? What's your timing? Do you have resources available? For someone who's skeptical, you want to link to what motivates them, and you want to reframe what you're doing in terms of their risks and rewards. For someone who's cautious, you want to invoke proof, and you want to think, what will they believe and who do they trust? And for someone who's unaware, you're provoking an emotion and you're describing something that they didn't think was possible, and you're trying to really bring it home to them. And knowing their attitude is often the difference between preempting or provoking objections. So in other words, again, what's relevant to them is what they can understand. What's irrelevant to them provokes an objection. So many of the times when we go and we're starting to present to people, we never really think about how well do they know what we're talking about and how much do they want what we're talking about. So, and there's a big, huge difference between I know what you're talking about, but do I want it or not? So let's go through an exercise about how to anticipate concerns better. And this is what I do this is how I learn to sell. Okay, so this is an internal discussion. I want you to think that you are the VP of sales and you're going to convince the general manager to use Pop Analytics. Okay, so you are already you already want to go with Pop Analytics. Okay, and you remember the GM was problem recognition. So she knows there's a problem, but as far as she's concerned, sales is a problem. So before you even think about who you're talking to, you want to make sure you understand their point of view and where they're at in terms of problem recognition, solution seeking, or recognition. So a lot of this is, I think William, you talked about it, it's like getting to know people before you start to sell. Otherwise, you're going to start selling and they're just like, they have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And for me, when I started selling, I didn't appreciate this. So I always started talking about like affordability without even knowing if they wanted what I had.
Gotcha.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about the GM's attitude towards Pop Analytics, but I want you to walk through the process with me. So before you just guess, or maybe you already know, based on what you know about the GM, do you think she's thinking about Pop Analytics or data analytics, and that's what's keeping her up at night? Based on this person, is she thinking about Pop Analytics or data analytics?
No, she's thinking about sales, right?
She's thinking about sales. So tell me some of the things she's thinking about in terms of sales.
Like, I think you're saying, it was saying, you know, there's already data, so that we paid for an analyst. Like, why, you know, why don't we have enough sales? Like, so all she knows is that she's paying something for something, but it's not producing results.
Right. So like, people love our brand. Everything was simple. I have an analyst. I buy data. The buyer said no. The sales team needs to fix this. So her attitude is she knows the importance of data. You wouldn't have a data analyst if you didn't think data was important. But she's focused on growth and selling more, and there's no connection about how data analytics and sales really meet. So based on that, what's her attitude? Is she skeptical? Is she cautious? Is she seeking the Holy Grail, or is she unaware?
Right, cautious.
She's actually skeptical because she knows about data, but she has low desire to do anything about it. She's not searching to do something more with data. She's more worried about sales. So if she understands the importance of data and she's not interested in data analytics, normally you would go into her and say, okay, let's work with Pop Analytics. Oh my gosh, you know, Linda, I just found this great company called Pop Analytics. They can expand our retail footprint by giving buyers data-driven recommendations. So if you walk in, talk to the the GM and say this, what's the GM gonna say?
We already have data. We have an analyst. Like, what's different about this?
Right. I already have an, exactly. So the first thing you're going to do, so you think without anticipating what her attitude is, you're going to go in with you normally do. Oh my gosh, I found this great thing. I want to go for it. It does all this stuff. And then you're really stunned when she's like, I already have an analyst. I already have data. I already spend lots of money. I don't need Pop Analytics. Salespeople need to sell better. This happens like all the time.
Yeah.
Because we think people are aligned with us and we don't think about what their attitude is. Okay, so then what would be a better way of persuading her? It would be reframing the risk and reward and linking to what's important to the GM. And what's important to the GM is she wants to grow the business better. She wants more sales. So if you wanted to talk about more sales, what types of things would hook her attention that would lead her to believe that she needs to do something with data analytics?
Probably hey, this gives you better forecasting and gives you like competitive insights into like, you know,
Perfect.
what our peers are doing.
Exactly. It helps us get into more doors. It helps us predict trends. It helps us compare to what everyone else is doing. It's all this data that we don't know that would help us sell better. So in other words, the benefits you have to talk to her about is growing the business, staying on shelves, bigger promotions, better ROI with sampling programs, things like that. So you can't approach her with Pop Analytics. She has no desire for it, but she has high desire for growing the business. So whatever you're talking about, you have to talk about the selling part. So the wrong focus provokes objections. So the GM's like, everyone loves us. We need to grow faster. Sales just needs to sell more. And if you walk in with, hey, let's go with Pop Analytics and we get better data-driven recommendations, she's going to be like, I have an analyst. If you have the relevant focus and you come in there and say, hey, I found this affordable way to help us quickly boost sales, get better returns on promotions, get better returns on sampling programs, she's at least going to say, what is the solution? So when you walk through the door, especially if you're doing something, again, I'm going to say on a corporate level, when you're proposing something, do you think that you're preempting or provoking objections? So I'm working with a client right now, and she's an entrepreneur. Her business is about 30, 40 million in sales, and she doesn't want to spend any money. But she really needs to hire a consultant. So I went in and I told her, oh my gosh, I have this great idea of how I can help you increase the valuation of your company. And she was like, what is it? Because she wants to have a good exit. She's privately held. And so she wants to have a good exit. And so I'm always talking to her about raising valuation. So the moment I walked in and said, I have an idea of how to raise your valuation. Oh, and by the way, it won't require you to, expand more into Asia and do all these expensive things. She instantly wanted to know what it was because I hooked her with what was important to her. Okay, and then the last thing to think, or the strategy 3 is when you think about After you hook them, you have to address concerns in this, I call it in a bundle. So when people object to things, objections actually follow a fairly predictable path. So I used to think that people sort of objected in a random way, or I always thought they would just worry about things like money, like affordability, and I was wrong. So you have to prepare for a series of, like I'll say, very predictable questions. So what happens is, after you propose something and they're like, wow, that sounds good, then they'll be like, no, wait a minute, prove it. Like the first thing that actually goes to their mind, whether they say it or not, they need some sort of proof point. And then once you say, yeah, okay, that point makes sense to them and it's proven, then they start to think, yeah, but I'm different. Like that was for a big company, I'm a small company, that was for beauty, I'm in laundry, you know, something different.
Yep.
Then they start to think about, okay, it will work for me, but is it really worth the investment? Will it really move the needle? So yes, it will work for me. Yes, I understand that it works, but is it worth the time, effort, and dollars putting into it? And then once you've decided that it will really make a difference, then they'll think about, well, how are you different than? Why can't I do this in-house? Why can't I use my current vendor? Why can't I just use Excel? Why do I have to buy a program? They start to think about why can't, like the other options of implementing it. And then you end up with things like sounds good, but it's complicated, or I've done it before, or what's the cost, or things like that.
Yep.
Okay, so we are not going to pitch Pop Analytics to the GM, all right? So remember, she's skeptical. So the first thing you have to do is identify their attitude. And then you have to identify your persuasion strategy. So, hey, Linda, I found this solution that can help us quickly boost our sales and get better returns at national retailers. And like, what is it? Oh, okay, it's something called Pop Analytics, and they help companies analyze opportunities more accurately. And, you know, we can get more out of our sampling programs or whatever. It's like you're hooking her with a simple one-sentence solution. So now the first thing you want to make sure you're prepared for is to prove your point. So you've identified their attitude, you understand their persuasion strategy, you give a brief explanation, think about prove it. In other words, what types of data do you think the GM would believe, or who would they trust? Like what type of example would you need to be prepared for right after making your statement that would make the GM think, yeah, that sounds good.
Like what I typically do is I'll use one of their competitors, like one of their peers, and just use that like example. So
Right.
the industry and the title of
Right.
so about another GM and
Right. Perfect. So it's one, or you given it, right, one of their clients, name the client who did this, each buyer, you know, they had a higher selling rate. They help these companies stay above the red line, right? But you give a specific example about who they would believe, what will they believe, and who do they trust? Then she's like, okay, sounds good. How, then you want to address, but I'm different. So how will you prove that your solution will work for them? What makes them think that they're so unique that your solution won't work for them? How are they different? And how might they push back? So what are some of the things that the GM might say?
how's this different from our data analyst team? Like what's wrong with our current in-house people?
I would say that's actually the next one. This is more like, yeah, but I'm different. Well, that worked in, oh, that was a food and beverage industry, but I'm in the beauty industry. Oh, but I'm different. I'm early stage company, that was a late stage company. Oh, that worked. So you're always thinking about how they're going to say, yeah, but I'm different. Your solution won't work for me. I'm used to doing it this way, you're proposing it that way. So what you always should think about is how they might think that they're different and that your solution won't work for them. So Oh, it works like, well, I'm a little company. The example you gave was for a large company. So you have to think about how they're going to push back and say, your solution won't work for my specific situation. And then, will it really matter? Is about how big of a difference will your solution really make for them? Is it really worth the investment? And you have to think about what would impress them. So yes, it'll work for me. Yes, you've proved it. I get what you do, but will it really matter? Should I invest the time, people, energy, and resources into it? And what are the types of things do you say for that?
Well, a lot of times, like the status quo, like clearly it's not working. You're not having sales. So if you don't do anything, you can go out of business. So, I mean, that's like one way of like saying it, but.
That's one, but not everybody thinks they're going out of business.
Right. Well, you're not hitting your goals that you want. So if you don't change anything, then it's just going to be the same.
Or you might want to say, like, you might want to talk, will it really matter? Well, it's going to matter because you're not having success with the national buyers. It will really matter because you're getting this rate of growth. In many cases, like I work with clients who are already growing. You're growing, but you want to grow even faster. So you want to be able to dimensionalize how big of a difference your solution will really make and that it's worth the investment. It's like, if this is the national average, we help you go well above the national average. Will it really matter if I implement it? And then, how are you different then? Why can't I use my current team? Why do I have to use your team? Why do I have to use Pop Analytics? Why can't I just use Excel? Why can't I hire my own data person? Why will your solution work? Why can't they do this on their own? What makes your solution unique? Like, why can't I use Tableau? Why do I have to use Pop Analytics? It's like, well, we're CPG only. So we work with consumer products only. We create strategic selling stories, but Tableau only helps you visualize data. We specifically have category management expertise. Tableau is, like more generic. So you have to think about how are you different then? And then there's things like secondary concerns, such as, is it complicated? What if it doesn't work? Will this really, will I have to replace my analysts? Do I need to get new analysts? Do I have to train them? And you think about the secondary ones. The point I have about this is, so think about this, so not in terms of selling, or Davidson, one of the things I want you to think about is, it's not just about selling to customers, but when you're pitching your ideas internally and you're trying to climb the corporate ladder, are you doing this very thing when you're proposing things to your hierarchy? Are you thinking, are they skeptical? So you want to change the way you do something. You want to change the way the pitch deck is going. You want to change the way things are getting analyzed. You want to change something about a structure. Are you following the same process to make internal sales, like to get your internal presentations really attractive to your hierarchy to say, that's a great idea? So.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing about sales, right? Only half of it is external. The other half that you have to sell is internal, right? So if you don't have all the right people, fighting for you internally, like you're not going to get promoted, right? Because ultimately, like, numbers is only half of the game. That's what I realized, like, the hard way,
Right. And so what you realize is a lot of times that the internal sell, so when people say, well, how did you learn how to sell? I actually I did nothing but internal sales, meaning I'm proposing that we roll out this program. I'm going to my boss and saying, I want you to give me $5 million to redo my ERP system. I want to hire 5 more people and you only budgeted me for 3. And I still have to pitch things, and I'm trying to pitch programs that move the needle in the company, that get internal results, that also get me recognized. And it's the actual same process, whether you're selling externally or internally. And really understanding your bosses, it's not not just your boss, but your boss's boss's boss, your VP, your EVP's point of view is really important when you're climbing the corporate ladder. So what I usually do, I physically always go through this process. Then I think about, out of everything that I've just written down and anticipated, which are the key things that I actually want to build in my presentation. You don't need to address like every potential objection when you present. You want to prepare for other, I sometimes just hold it back and I just say, I'll show it as a bag sheet, another slide, or I'll ask it, or I'll answer it if someone asks me, but I always try to keep my presentations pretty short. When I followed this process, I helped a brand new startup pitch successfully to Unilever in 5 minutes and with only 3 slides. And up until that point, he was unable to close any large corporations. And all we did was follow the same process. He went and made the pitch and he was like, oh my God, they said, come in next week. And the last thing is about not just streaming out lots of information. It's about, do you know how to really steer conversations? So when you're trying to persuade someone, sometimes it's a journey to change their mindset. So if you think about, if you're trying to get your hierarchy to go from one place to another and to buy into what you're doing, it's not just a one-time go in and say, here's what I want to do, because in reality, there's the persuasion zone about what they can understand, and there's also what's really, really top of mind. So let me just really switch now from a corporate career standpoint, which is what is top of mind for them when they're trying to build their business. So what's most meaningful, persuasive, and memorable to them is really the intersection of what they can understand and what's top of mind. So what's going on in their mind in terms of building the business, making capital spends, making investments, how are they trying to grow their shareholder return, and how do you position what you're talking about to thread that needle? So when you're talking to, I'm going to focus primarily from an internal corporate standpoint, it's much more step by step to change their awareness, where you have to go from unaware to problem recognition, from problem recognition to solution seeking, from solution seeking to recognition that your solution's the best, to like, okay, what's the deal? And then if you're pitching something where you already know they're looking for what you have, like that's the classic Shark Tank pitch. But you have to make sure you know how you're going to convince them, and if you have to persuade them over time. So changing mindsets could be something that could take months to do if you want to get them from A to Z. And you should always think about focusing on changing one mindset at a time. And you can't skip levels of awareness. You have to hit every piece. You might be able to hit several levels of awareness in one discussion, but you really want to make sure that you don't just jump. So it's, if someone thinks there's no problem, they have to recognize something is a problem. If they recognize that something's a problem, you have to motivate them to want to change and look for a solution. Once they're motivated to find a solution, you want to point them at your solution. And then once they're ready for your solution, then you want them to know, like, how does it work? And you want them to, this is the part you close the deal, sign on the dotted line, win approval for something. But it's a step-by-step process. So when I go through this, I always think about what's each mindset, because people's mindset starts to change as they go through the persuasion journey. And I always think about what other new objections that they're going to face as they move them from one point to the next. So it's all about not needing lots of preparation for every possible objection, but you really want to target what's most relevant. And you want to think about what their target audience's point of view is, because your different audiences will have different objections. Then you want to target what your audience's sweet spot is, so that you are not provoking objections, but that you're preempting the objections. And then you want to think about how your objections come in predictable bundles. So you want to address them as a group, and then you want to figure out which is the most applicable to present when you're talking to them in person. And then you want to steer conversations from point to point to point, especially if you're thinking about changing people's mindsets. So I'll give you an example of how I use this. So I have a friend of mine, this is like a month ago, 2 months ago, she asked me, send me a proposal. So we had a long conversation for an hour. She's one of my best friends. She's hired me in the past. She said, send me a proposal. So I sent her this email. It's like 428 words. I figured, how hard can this be? She already pretty much said she wanted to do it. But then she forwards my letter. So it's a proposal to do strategic communications training at a corporation. She forwards it to the learning and development manager, and she delegated the decision to him. So he takes a look at my email without any context, and my friend writes back to me and says, oh, boo-hoo, check back in 3 or 4 months. We have internal people who can do this. So I wrote back to her, and I decided to change my persuasion strategy with her. And I did something, I sent her an email that was like 98 words long. So I knew that, now that I knew that she was going to delegate the decision to someone else, I knew I had to say it differently in order to get my process through, and 428 words was way too many. She took my email, she highlighted 16 words, sent it to L&D manager. 12 hours later, he's like, I'd like to connect, and we signed a contract like a week later. So clarity really matters, and your ability to anticipate. So even though I knew where my friend was at, I didn't anticipate she was going to send it to someone else. I had to shift my persuasion strategy, and I was still able to close it much faster than I thought I was going to be able to do it. So I'm really super focused on the clear and concise communications for your influence and your impact and your effectiveness. I'm really, like I said, I spent a lot of time working with Asian American professionals. We're like super smart, high potential managers. We want to impress our leaders. We get great results. And yet for some reason, like I think you might already know the statistics, we're like less likely to lead meetings. A study that I read in the LA Times said that Asians lead only like 51% of the meetings compared to their white counterparts. And leading a meetings is a super easy way of becoming more visible. We are the least likely group to get promoted to the executive level, in spite of being the largest professional minority group, the highest with the highest level of education, the most likely to be hired. And Asian American women have a 66 underrepresentation at the executive level. They say that Asian American women have the double glass ceiling. So you go through one glass ceiling and there's still a second. So that's why I wanted to spend some time talking about overcoming objections, because, you know, communications and improving our communications is one factor we can control. So I can't change people's biases. I can't control everything that's going around me, but I can control the way I communicate so that I can instill more confidence in me and my solutions. I can use my communications to increase my influence, to align executive stakeholders, and then to break through the glass ceiling, or the double glass ceiling in some cases. And that is my training.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
I'm just kind of curious how much training like this you already get.
You wanna talk first, William, and then we'll go afterwards.
Um, well, I don't have any of that training. I mean, to be honest, I mean, my experience with sales is when I was younger, I really didn't have direction in my life, and so I think at the time I was trying to find myself. I went into business with some friends, and the one thing, you know, it was the thrill of owning your own business, and it was a small office supply printing place in New York in Chinatown, and you know, I was young, naive, thinking that I can make it big, but it was just a phase in my life where it was good to be in business. But the one thing I still remember to this day, I worked 60 hours and I made $100 a week, but the thrill of owning my own business was it. And you know, so I lived at home. You know, I didn't have too much drive and stuff like that. But the one thing it taught me, that business, was that the ability to sell and the ability to approach anyone, you know, regardless, big, small companies, just having the ability to persevere, take rejections. And so I don't have formal training like all of you guys, but for me, that was, you know, even though I made $100 a week for maybe about 2-3 years, I was okay with it because I knew I was learning a skill that was priceless. And it was, for me, it was something that that if I had to go back and do it over again, I would do the same exact thing. Because I think, like I said before, the ability to sell yourself, to persuade people to like you, is one thing. You know, nobody wants to do business with assholes, right? Nobody wants to do business with someone they dislike. So being likable is definitely one thing, is important. Being able to present yourself in a professional manner is another thing. And for me, that was my training. And you know, I've carried that, I fine-tuned it. I learned to adapt. I'm good with rejection. I don't, you know, for me, Davidson will tell you, I'm good with rejection. If someone doesn't want to use our service, it's their loss. It's their loss. I'll go on to the next one, because you can't cry or spill milk and stuff like that. The approach that I take is like, you know, if you give your best presentation and people still reject you, it's their loss. You know, and you have to do that, especially in sales. In sales, you could take it personally. You could take it personally when you say, oh, that was my friend, I'm going to slam dunk it. It's a done deal. I'm going to get the deal. And then long and behold, you don't get the deal, because the more you think, the more you think you're going to get it, the more disappointed you are. So sometimes it's much better to just be like, you know, you have to have that chip on your shoulder. Sales is that way. For me, it's definitely that way. I don't, you know, Davidson will tell you, I don't really care. I'm at a point in business where at the beginning of any business, you take whatever you can get, you know, the sloppy seconds, the leftovers in business. But I'm at a good point in my life now where the business is growing. I'm getting better clients, and I get to reject the ones I don't want. So for me, it's the opposite, where if they approach me, if I get referred by some people, they come to me, I'm like, it's already 90% that they're going to use me, but that 10% is me to persuade them and close, because that's what it is. You know, people can refer business to you all the time. You know, someone could say, hey, here's a client, he'll definitely use you and stuff like that. You still got to close. 90% is done. You know, getting the lead or getting the prospect, 90% done. 10% is how you present yourself, persuade them, just like what you said, figuring out their pressure points and stuff like that. And just figuring out, you know, their point of view. I mean, I like that whole thing about the POV and stuff like that, because it really is like, what's their point of view? Oh, what Will does is shitty. We don't even need him. We'll let someone else do it. But, you know, and that's what, in business, you have to project your value added. You know, what extra value? Because if everything's the same across the board, you know, if your price is the same as everyone else's, what's the difference between you and anyone else? Right? What extra value can you present? And that's why I learned in business that you have to adapt with the times, because, you know, you could have done certain things one way, but nowadays it's obsolete, or technology has changed everything. So yeah, for me, like I said, you guys have way more training than I do. in sales, but I'm the old school type of thing. I think being, you know, personable, likable, and listen, there are clients that I have, there are people that are my friends that were probably former prospects and they're now my friends now and stuff like that. I like to think that, you know, you never know where business comes from. So you always got to be genuine. You always got to be nice to people. You can't say, oh, that asshole didn't use me. You know, you got to be, you know, you can't leave situations like that. You have to always be professional. And like I said, you know, you never know where business comes. I mean, I think you treat people the way that you want to be treated. And, you know, if someone pitches me and I don't like them, I don't call them an asshole. I just say, you know, it wasn't for us. So, but that's the extent of my training.
Ivana, any comments or anything?
I mean, in regards to the original question about like what type of training we have received.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Oh, can you hear me?
You're like really soft.
She's Asian, that's why. No offense, no offense. Only joking. Only
No,
joking.
when I was in Japan, they told me I was too noisy. US, they told me I was too quiet. In Japan, they said I was too noisy. Same person.
You guys hear me okay? I think I'm speaking pretty loudly, but maybe it's the computer.
It is a little bit distant. It sounds like you're further away from the mic.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay. I mean, in regards to the original question about like what type of training I've received personally, I mean, for context for everyone, I am not with LinkedIn anymore, and I'm actually making the transition to another company, and I start on Monday. But with my time at LinkedIn, the type of training I've received, we were selling LinkedIn Learning, which is training for companies. So I would say, obviously, being encouraged to use our own product for learning. My manager would host like one-on-one or two-on-one sessions. Sometimes we do like group workshops, but I would say our most consistent ongoing training was through kind of like a pre-recorded like video or tutorial type thing. So that was kind of like, in order to keep quote unquote like progressing, we would have to we had certain benchmarks, like complete this many videos by this day. So yeah, I would say takeaways that I'll start with my new job on Monday as I continue on in sales. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of the space.
I'm curious for Davidson and Ivana, like how, like it's very clear the training really, especially Davidson, really resonated with you, right? You're like you're super sharp, but at the same time, I'm curious what we need to do from translating that into Asian leader success, right? So it seriously, I really, William, what you said about Davidson really resonated with me, because I'm just thinking, man, he probably should have been like twice as fast as me climbing the corporate ladder. Yeah. And then I hear him say the same frustrations that I had. And I'm like, oh, no, this cannot be true, because he's actually, I mean, I started off in my corporate career super timid and like really unremarkable, and I really struggled. And so I see someone like that and I'm like, man, they should just be like rocket on their ass, headed straight up. And then like, wait, why is there still I'm very frustrated with the fact there's still a bamboo ceiling, glass ceiling, or whatever. And I want to help crack that. That's like communication. And that's why I'm much more about, it's the branding, the executive presence, what causes you to get pulled by a mentor, and why is not the sales success the same skills? Why can't they help you navigate career success? I'm really passionate about wanting to help do that. And it doesn't matter. It seriously doesn't matter how smart you are if people just don't click with you.
Yeah, definitely. But I also think something else is like, sometimes, this is for me, what I truly believe. Sometimes you, growing up, you don't really know how to think big. And I think that's one of the problems that all Asians have. You know, it's like thinking big is like getting a job, get the white picket fence, get married, have kids, and that's it. But thinking big, and you know, for me, I like thinking big was like I had to be better than my parents. My dad was a cook at a restaurant. My mom was a seamstress. So for me, just being a business owner, I'm already 10 steps ahead of them. But thinking big to know, because we all have our limiting beliefs just because we're Asian or whatever. You guys have the double whammy because you're female and stuff like that. So you got the double whammy, but sometimes it's really hard to think big for yourself if you never experienced it when you're younger. Because if everybody told you that you should do X, Y, and Z, how do you know how to get to A, B, and C? And I think sometimes that's one of the things that stops us. I mean, for me, growing up, like I wanted to be a fireman as a kid, and then I wanted to be a social worker. And then when I realized that social workers don't make money, I said, forget it, I'm out. I really didn't know what I wanted to do until later in life. And I was lucky. I always tell people I'm very lucky to be in business because I had no direction. And the only thing I really knew in life was just accounting. And I just started building it and building. And luckily for me, I was able to have something. But if you told me to think big at that time of my life when I was younger, I would have said, oh, let me just get a job, make $60K a year, and I'll be happy for the rest of my life. And I think for Asians especially, to know that there's no ceiling for whatever you want to do in life. That I think that's one of the problems. I mean, for me personally, that's the way I always felt. Like my parents were never like pushing me to be better than them because I was already better than them. So it's something that, in your mindset, you have to figure out like how to think big. And I always tell Davison, for me, the game changer in my life was always like to not, if you're always low and if you always like feel status quo and you don't know how to get higher, all your friends are in the same position and your parents aren't motivating you. What's the X factor? What's going to push you over? You could watch YouTube, see someone more successful than you. You're like, wow, that's cool. I can do that. But I always tell Davison, the game changer in my life to switch my whole mindset was books. I mean, I think, being able to, Davison knows me well. Like if you're over here and you want to get over here and you're trying to figure out why you're not there is the biggest question, right? If I want to be X and I'm at Y, why am I not there? And you could rattle your brain to try to figure it out and stuff like that. But sometimes you can just read a book and it can help you figure it out. Because one of the things that Tony Robbins says, like, whatever you're going through in life, someone has gone through it. Someone has figured it out. So don't try to spend time figuring it out when someone else did it right. So he always says success leaves clues. And, you just have to be able to figure out where the clues are. And like for me, clues were always in the books, always in the books. It's there. You just have to find it. And for me, that always makes me think like I said, the number one problem for being Asian is sometimes you don't know how to think big. But if you read about more successful people and, Davison's, I tell Davison, there are probably, in my lifetime, I tell him that he's going to probably be more successful than me. And I think he's just in the right direction. Everything that he's doing is in the right direction. And what you're doing for him to mentor him, I think is a great thing. I think that's the way it should be. And that you should help people to get to the point, point A to point B faster. And, like I said, I think people need to figure out what the thinking big is, because if your ceiling is X, you want to get higher, you don't know how to. So, all right, I won't talk anymore. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
I think I really liked your point, William, about like limiting beliefs and stuff,
Yeah.
because I think everything you said really resonated with me. And so going back to your question, Rebecca, I'm only 23, so I've only been working for 1 year out of college, but something I've noticed that some of my like white counterparts do that I want to get better at is actually the statistic you showed about speaking up in meetings. Some of the people really successful in my cohort, they are just super consistent. Every meeting, like bringing up a new idea, a new like value add, if you will, organizing the team happy hour, organizing the next team event. And I think growing up, I never had that. Like my parents don't celebrate birthdays. We don't do anything special for Halloween or Christmas. So I think like in addition to crushing your role, crushing your results, I've noticed some of my counterparts are thinking like, yeah, thinking bigger, right? Like, how do we boost team morale and do these like fun events where it's like, that wasn't natural for me if my own like family didn't really do that growing up. And not to like victimize myself, but I mean, it's just a self-awareness thing that I want to take to my next role. Like, I want to, yeah, definitely think bigger. Like, in addition to myself, how can I help others and be really consistent with that? So that was just something I was kind of reflecting on when you posed that question, Rebecca. Like, how can we get, you know, Asian Americans there faster? And I think, at least for me, I think that's how I want to get there faster, is in my next role, being every meeting, raising my hand, or maybe I'll take on the next like team happy hour, like I'll host it. So just really showcasing that leadership skill from the very beginning, I think will help me and, you know, be like something that people will remember me by instead of waiting. Because at LinkedIn, I think I waited a little bit because I was shy at first. And then like month 3 in, I started showcasing those leadership traits, like raising my hand more. But I definitely noticed that it takes me longer, whereas some of my white counterparts, like day one, just raising their hands, saying whatever comes to their mind. So that was just my reflection to what we were all talking about.
Good. That's good. That's great. I mean, especially starting a new job, you know, no one knows you. You could go kick ass.
Although I do think, like, you have to know I don't know about the culture, the business you're going into, but one thing I've noticed that Asian leaders are trying that I particularly don't think is effective yet is that thinking as an executive who had to promote leaders, it's still kind of like Asians are like, okay, if I like volunteer for a lot of things, that somehow that will translate into someone noticing I have leadership potential. And it's a little bit like, it's wrong. It's like a little bit too much hopeful thinking. So it was one thing to like volunteer to do things, but but everything has to be deliberate what you're volunteering for and how it's getting viewed. So it's one thing to be viewed as, oh, she's super fun and super social, which is not the same as leading. Mm-hmm. So, and I was telling Davidson, I met this guy at Salesforce, and he finally stepped away from the ERG that he founded, and he's very, very successful. And he's like on all these boards, he does all this volunteer work. He helped found this alliance for other Asian ERGs across the Bay Area, and yet it hasn't turned into any upward mobility. And I'm like, it's like he's doing all these things, and yet it hasn't done anything for someone to say, boy, this guy has really got leadership potential. And it's not, and I just think, man, I have to help you navigate corporate careers better, because it's a political game. And I don't mean you have to be political, but it's a game to how you get yourself noticed on the right projects, how to speak up, how to get someone to be like, yeah, you. And it's more than just volunteering for lots of things. And for some reason, I'm like, who keeps telling everyone to keep volunteering for everything without knowing if it's going to add up to something?
Going off of that point, that is really interesting, right? Because it's not just about like quantity at that point, like how many things you can volunteer for. So what was like the first step you kind of took with him, or what's the first question you posed to him to kind of like understand which one would be more impactful then? Or like, how did you help him think through that?
Well, I was just more like, all those volunteer things, which I think are incredible, are you any closer to promotion? And the answer was no. And I had a mentor, and I told Davidson, my first really great mentor would be like, who's the next mentor you're going to get? And I'm like, well, I'm going to get this person mentor. It's like, oh, terrible mentor. This is why. This is how you use mentors. What? There's a way to use mentors? Yeah, there's a way to use mentors, you know? And then it was, when I mentored people, I would sit next to me and listen to how I talk about those people. And now this is how I judge your performance. Do you see? And they were shocked at what I judged their performance on versus what they thought their performance was being judged on. So I would tell them, like, I would sit in an executive team. I would have like a really talented high performance manager sit with me. And I'm like, now just listen to how we just like talk about you guys. And he's like, that's what you listen for? I'm like, yes. So you're sitting there, we're in a room and you're trying to be efficient. So they're like doing their email and other things and letting other people talk. So we're like, did you see that person? They weren't even paying attention. That person wasn't paying attention. You think you're being head down and you're showing that you're really using your time well. We're looking at you and thinking, Why don't they participate? Why don't they add to the equation? Why don't they make that project better? Why don't they move the needle? It's like, why do they even show up if they're going to sit there and do their email? Like what I looked for and what they thought they were presenting and what I thought they were doing was like worlds apart.
So thank you so much. So just to let you know, I'm probably going to be posting this online. I hope that's okay with everyone.
So that's why, I mean, that's what I'm just trying to figure out. The reason why I'm asking Davidson, like, can I meet some of the people that you're with? I want to help crack this. And we're not gonna be able to do it one at a time. We have to do this more systematically. We have to think about how to move people up. I was very lucky because someone helped me navigate it, and then I started figuring it out. And I was really pretty quiet at that part of my career, and I learned how to speak up, and I learned how to say no, and I learned how to navigate that career. And I took on really tough things, but I also learned how to present myself. So when I presented my results, people were like, that was show-stopping. I'm like, yes, that was show-stopping, period. Like, there was no question when I got promoted, I was the next one who deserved to get promoted. It was much more focused than what I feel like you're doing in your careers. But I love what William said about thinking big, because my mentor taught me how to think big. I was like, I hope to get to be good one day. My parents were like, and whatever you do, never raise your hand. So my parents were like making sure I thought kind of small. Right? But my mentor was like, why don't you think big? I was shocked that I actually had it in me to be big. And that's what I think that's why having someone like William challenge you is like brilliant, and you need someone not always from a corporate career to challenge you.
Hey, I actually have a 5:30, but let's table this conversation and we'll do part 2 because there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah, awesome. And thank you for allowing me to do. I would love to connect with you, Ivana, because it's a totally different part of your career than Davidson, myself, or William, and I'd love to talk more.
Yeah, really appreciate that. Thank you guys for the time. It was great to meet everyone. Hope to talk.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Guys.
Right.